Este episodio de Demente Positivo llega a ustedes por cortesía del Cala Center, el paradisíaco centro de formación integral situado en el suroeste de la ciudad de Miami, a 30 minutos del Aeropuerto Internacional de Miami. Un centro de formación holística para los líderes de alta conciencia basados en el modelo de liderazgo Mindful Exponencial de Cala Enterprises, Cala Academy y el Influencers Circle. Te invito a nuestro evento presencial de febrero, el 27 de febrero, sábado desde las 9 de la mañana hasta las 4 de la tarde, cupos extremadamente limitados, evento presencial con todos los protocolos tomados que impone el COVID-19. El taller tiene por título La ciencia de perdonar, antídoto contra la ansiedad y la depresión. Y es que febrero es el tiempo perfecto para decir adiós a los malos recuerdos. En este encuentro podrás sanar heridas y continuar el camino ligera de equipaje. Vamos a romper mitos de por qué no puedo yo perdonar y por qué además debo entender que científicamente, en todo orden de beneficios para mi mente, mi psiquis, mi energía, mis emociones y sobre todo mi vehículo de transporte que es mi cuerpo, el perdonar es un acto de autosanación. Entra en ismaelcala.com/Cala Center o escribe y llama al WhatsApp 305-360-9940 más 1-305-360-9940. La ciencia de perdonar, antídoto contra la ansiedad y depresión, en Miami, en el Cala Center, sábado 27 de febrero. Te esperamos. Vivimos en un mundo cada vez más volátil, incierto, complejo y ambiguo.
La ropa no me sirve.
Siempre planifico y nunca me salen las cosas. Estoy cansado.
Un mundo en el que muchos viven desde la excusa, la queja y la no aceptación.
Estoy muy desordenado.
Necesito votos. No soporto a mi jefe.
Estoy demasiado deprimido.
Para que no te vuelvas loco, aquí reprogramamos tu coco. Inteligencia emocional, psicología positiva. Todas las herramientas que necesitas para convertirte en un demente positivo.
Demente Positivo, el programa de Ismael Cala.
Hola, saludos por aquí Ismael, regresando una semana más a nuestro Demente Positivo. Para que no te vuelvas loco, aquí reprogramamos tu coco. Gracias a todos los que todas las semanas están con nosotros en Demente Positivo y que la verdad pues nos hacen pasar un rato extraordinario. Yo me la paso increíblemente bien mientras estamos haciendo este programa para ustedes. Hoy estoy aquí colocándome los audífonos porque claro, cuando uno se escucha mientras graba su voz, que es un tip para los que quieren ser podcasters o comunicadores, cuando uno se escucha, uno puede autorregular mejor su voz y uno no necesita gritar o hablar demasiado bajito, ¿verdad? Hoy no tenemos un solo de Ismael Cala. Hoy tenemos a Ismael entrevistando a una gran invitada que, por cierto, formó parte ya hace unos cuantos meses de una masterclass de nuestro Influencer Circle. Siempre les digo que este es el programa de membresía. Tiene 3 niveles gracias a la pandemia del 2020. Ampliamos el programa no solo a el nivel platino, que era el único que existía desde el lanzamiento del círculo, sino que ahora también tenemos silver, plata y oro. 3 niveles, 3 programas, 3 facilidades para los que quieren estar todo un año, 12 meses con mentoría, coaching, acompañamiento de este servidor Ismael Cala, pero también de Jack Giraud, nuestro super coach que le da seguimiento a las sesiones estratégicas de todos los meses o las estaciones. Y por supuesto el Influencer Circle tiene a los mejores del mundo. Y Janine Shepherd es una escritora, conferencista, es una motivadora australiana, piloto de acrobacias aéreas y ex esquiadora. En 1986 su carrera como atleta sufrió un revés cuando tuvo lesiones mortales al ser atropellada por un camión durante un entrenamiento en bicicleta. Y antes del accidente había competido por ganar la primera medalla de Australia en los Juegos Olímpicos de Invierno. Aunque los doctores guardaban pocas esperanzas de vida para ella y aseguraron que de sobrevivir nunca volvería a caminar, Janine no solamente desafió su diagnóstico médico, sino que logró certificarse como acróbata aérea, piloto comercial y a los 18 meses de haber transcurrido el accidente, logró obtener su permiso como entrenadora en la misma academia de pilotos en la que ingresó. Entonces ella dijo, si no puedo caminar, entonces volaré. If I can walk, well, then I'll fly. Su historia más tarde se convirtió en inspiración para millones de personas en todo el mundo, incluso fue llevada al cine. Según ella señala, a través de la angustia y la depresión, la pérdida y el dolor, encontré más amor, más pasión y resistencia de lo que jamás había conocido. Y la verdad que su historia de vida le ha empujado a escribir obras como Never Tell Me Never, Dare to Fly, On My Own Two Feet, Reaching for Stars, The Gift of Acceptance y Defiant. A broken body is not a broken person. ¡Wow! Me encanta Janine Shepherd, es una conversación que sostuvimos en inglés, ella no habla español, así que yo les invito a aquellos que sienten un poquito de intimidación, como me pasaba a mí, a mis 29, 30 años recién llegado a Canadá de Cuba, a todos esos que pueden sentir eso, quédense, no tiren la toalla, escuchen a Janine, escúchenla, porque es un mensaje poderoso y también porque el inglés es el idioma de negocios, es el idioma donde se comunica la mayor parte del mundo. Nosotros tenemos la ventaja de hablar español, que somos millones y millones y millones de hispanoparlantes. Sin embargo, sigue siendo inglés el idioma de preferencia para las transacciones más importantes en el mundo. Ahí está la primera parte de la conversación en este Demente Positivo con Janine Shepherd. Nos vamos a Australia con ella. So, here with us for our circle of influence and for our community all across Latin America and the world, we want to introduce to you Janine Shepherd. So I said that I discovered Janine's story and I heard about her, and I then got the book and read the book, and I watched the TED Talk, which is also brilliant, awesome. You know, she managed to make us laugh in a story that is really, really like a life or death story. And it's really amazing. So I really would like to congratulate you, Janine. And just let's start with a question about mindset. Because, you know, we are living in 2020, coronavirus, everything has been shaken for all of us, especially our expectations and our plans for the year. And it's all about mindset. And when I read, you know, how you have found purpose and redefine the vision of your life and reimagine your life flying instead of being scared, I said, well, you know, if someone can help us to understand how we can manage to create and recreate a positive mindset, is Janine Shepherd. So how can we do it? Welcome.
Thank you for all those kind words. And it is definitely a incredibly challenging time for everybody right now. And, you know, that when we hold on to an idea of how life is supposed to be, we understand that we suffer. And I think there are many great lessons that we can learn from what we're all going through right now. Many of the lessons that I learned lying paralyzed in a spinal ward for almost 6 months. One of the most important ones that I wasn't alone, and that, you know, accidents don't discriminate. And that's another great, you know, lesson that we can learn right now, in that we are actually all experiencing this pandemic in different ways. Some are suffering a lot more than others, but, you know, we are all suffering to some degree. So we need to let go of our expectations of how we think life is supposed to be, because life just is. This is what we're going through right now. And, you know, I went through that very same thing when I got home from hospital, and I was in a wheelchair and a plaster body cast, and I was, you know, paralyzed, and I realized that instead of being an elite athlete, I was now a woman with a disability, and I had to come to terms with that. And I did suffer when I got home, and I was very depressed. And I got to the point where I thought, well, why did I choose to come back to my body? And for those that have seen my TED Talk, you'll know I talk about going through a death experience, not a near-death experience. I did actually leave my body and made the choice to come back. And I remember very clearly that I recognized that the more I held on to the ideal of being an athlete, of having the life that, I thought I was supposed to have, the more I suffered. And I remember very clearly also saying one night, crawling out of my bed onto the floor and saying, God, you show me a way out of this or show me a way through. And it was at that moment that I really let go. And when I let go, the releasing of my expectations, that's really when I began my journey of healing. So I think there are many similarities in what we're going through right now. And one is to loosen our grip on how we think life is supposed to look. Because life is not supposed to look anyway. Life is just what we're seeing right now. So did that answer part of your question? There's so many lessons of my journey. And, so I think letting go and loosening our grip, I think life in general is about letting go. It's letting go of expectations. It's letting go of how we think life is supposed to be, and just being really, really present with what we have right now.
Thank you, Janine. And when you talk about near-death experiences, which is a topic that I'm fascinated by and with, how could you describe, like being or having the experience of your consciousness out of your body? And, it's so interesting because you said here on the book and actually on the TED Talk as well, that when you were on the body, you could feel the excruciating pain, but when you were just spirit or, in a spiritual dimension, it was peace and nothing out of the earthly needs. And, really, I always wonder what could be that transition into the afterlife. So tell us a little bit more about that moment.
Well, I spent 10 days, in what I call in that experience when they were fighting to keep me alive in intensive care, drifting in and out of what I call, different dimensions. And what was very clear to me is that I wasn't alone, and also that I had a choice. I didn't have to come back to my body, but I made the very clear choice to come back to my body, which was interesting because I always wondered, why I made that choice. And I think as I talk about in my TED Talk as well, having been an elite athlete who defined myself by my body, the greatest opportunity for me to wake up to who I really was, my spiritual self, was to come back with a body that wasn't perfect, a body that was broken. And that was the one thing that was going to wake me up to who I really was at the deepest level. So, that was a very clear choice to come back. And, also for those who maybe haven't seen my TED Talk, which was the talk of the day on TED.com, it's called A Broken Body Isn't a Broken Person. In fact, the original title of my TED Talk was You're Not Your Body. And when I was being interviewed for that talk, the curator, Mike Lundgren, asked me, he said, look, it's a great story, but what's the most important thing you've learned from your story? Because TED is about one idea worth sharing. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, I'm not my body. And he said, now that's a TED Talk. So the original title was You're Not Your Body. And then TED.com put it on their site as the talk of the day and changed the title to A Broken Body Isn't a Broken Person.
Wow, that's wonderful. And I know that a lot of people, have gone through, and I have interviewed during my career several heroes, because I call you heroes when you can really overcome a difficult moment in your life, and you can really kind of fix in your mind probably what could not be fixed in the body. In your case, you reimagine your life. And how long was the period of grief, of, kind of detachment from the former life that you had as a professional athlete, until you decide to fly and to become something else?
I think it was relatively short. I mean, I spent 6 months in the spinal ward, almost 6 months, and left hospital in a wheelchair and a plaster cast. I think it was the getting home initially and realizing how different my life was. You know, I couldn't move my legs, even though I wanted to move my legs. I had to learn to use a catheter. I mean, I had to come to terms with a body that I didn't like. And that was extremely difficult from someone who had really defined themselves by their body. So I slipped into a very deep depression when I got home. And I realized very quickly that I recognized that I made a choice to come back. And so I realized that I had a choice in how I viewed this going forward. The more I held on to the idea that I was an elite athlete and that I wanted to go to the Olympics, the more I suffered. And, I just recognized there was something inside me that said, let go. You know, you came back here for a reason. And I think it was probably within a month or two of getting home from hospital, by the time, reality hit and I realized this is my life now. You know, I'm a woman with a disability. And, my parents, I remember my mum sitting on my bed and crying and saying, I wonder if life will ever be good again. And I thought I'd lost everything that I valued in life. And then, the recognition that I've made this choice and I'm going to let go and I'm going to trust life and I'm going to trust the process. And in the letting go came this incredible freedom, this freedom that, firstly, I didn't have to do anything. I wasn't an athlete. I didn't have to go training. There was that pressure had gone. And it was like I had a clean slate. And I got to recreate my life in whatever way I chose. And of course, it was at that moment that the airplane flew over and I had that incredible insight of, if I can't walk, I'll fly. And, that when people ask me why I chose flying, I say I didn't. I think flying chose me. I think it was a provocation. I think it was an invitation and from something much greater than me. And flying is an incredible metaphor for life. So it really saved me.
¿Qué tal? Maravillosa esta primera parte de la conversación con Janine Shepherd. Como les digo, escritora, conferencista, motivadora australiana, piloto de acrobacias aéreas y esquiadora profesional. Vamos a una pausa y regresamos en instantes con más de la segunda parte de esta conversación y también donde algunos de los miembros del Influencer Circle tuvieron la oportunidad de hacerles preguntas a Janine Shepherd. No te lo pierdas, ya vuelvo.
Nuestro invitado se está convirtiendo en un demente positivo.
En estos próximos 3 días va a haber un entrenamiento técnico, pero al mismo tiempo va a haber otro entrenamiento que es el entrenamiento mindfulness, el entrenamiento liderazgo, el entrenamiento conciencia.
He aprendido no solo las técnicas del maestro, sino también a conocerme, a poder desafiar mis propios límites y poder llegar a ser la comunicadora que quiero ser.
Mi experiencia ha sido realmente fantástica. Ismael Cala es uno de los mejores comunicadores. Me enseñó sobre todo a conectar mi corazón con la audiencia.
Y así llegamos al final de la 4ª promoción de Cala Speaking Academy. 4 días intensos de convivencia, de aprendizaje, de desaprendizaje, pero sobre todo de compartir desde el corazón. ¡Gracias a todos! Nos vemos en el próximo.
Señoras y señores, atención, por favor.
Presta atención. Ismael Cala tiene muchas buenas cosas para contarte. Aquí, en Demente Positivo. Demente Positivo.
Aquí estoy de regreso en este episodio de Demente Positivo. Soy Ismael Cala, calando fuerte en tu corazón. Gracias por darnos 5 estrellitas cuando este contenido te cala profundo y hondo. Gracias por compartir este podcast con 3 o 5 personas. Pueden ser amigos, pueden ser familiares, pueden ser colegas de trabajo. Muchísimas gracias. Estoy feliz de que ustedes hayan hecho este podcast uno de los de más descargas en idioma español en temas de crecimiento personal, psicología positiva y mindfulness. O sea, todo eso que llaman autoayuda. Y la verdad que yo digo, bueno, si no te ayudas tú, ¿quién más te va a ayudar? Gracias, y aquí está la segunda parte de la conversación con Janine Shepherd en Demente Positivo. That's wonderful. I have to read your book, The Gift of Acceptance, because I think it will be, full of insights for me. And I'm curious about acceptance and your evaluation of acceptance, because I want to know if it's a gift, or do you think that acceptance is something, as I used to see it, that I needed to work on acceptance and be disciplined and kind of force myself into gratitude and acceptance? And you said the book is The Gift of Acceptance. Okay.
Well, acceptance, people have misconceptions about acceptance. Acceptance isn't resignation. It's not giving up. I always say that acceptance is a verb. It's a choice. We all have a choice in how we, what mindset we want to create, how we want to go forward with whatever we experience in life, just like we all have a choice in how we view the pandemic right now. And, one of my greatest teachers, and I did mention this in my TED Talk, was that the girl next to me in hospital called Maria, who woke up from a coma, and she was 18, and, she spent the rest of her life as a quadriplegic. She was the most injured person in the hospital and could only move her head. And they put her next to me in hospital. They put us together in beds next to each other because we were closest in age. And she was one of the greatest teachers I could ever hope for, because even though she was much more disabled than I was, she could only move her head. She always smiled and she was always happy. And if anyone had a reason to complain, it was her. And I could never complain. All I had to do was look next to me and see Maria, and I could never feel sorry for myself. So she taught me about acceptance. And, one day that book was written because I was, writing, so that was the one part of it, Maria teaching me about acceptance. And then I was in Outback, Australia, speaking at a small country hall one day. And there was a lady there who was in her mid-80s. And she said, "Thank you for coming along and sharing your story." And she said, I have 8 children. Oh, actually, no, 7. My son just died. And I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that." And she said, "Oh, don't feel sorry for me, dear, because just like you, I've been given the gift of acceptance." Wow. And it was in that moment that I realized that accepting what I'd been through in life was key to moving through the challenges and the experiences. And I realized that acceptance is the one thing that life is always inviting us to do, to accept what we're going through right now. The people that are really suffering this pandemic are the people that can't accept. Although the irony of that, of course, is that, when you can't, if you accept the non-acceptance, that's acceptance too, right? Because some things are easier to accept than others. It's much easier, I say, to accept losing a game of tennis than it is losing a child. So some things, are more challenging. But basically, that is what life is always asking us to do. Acceptance to me is a verb. It's saying yes to life. It's saying yes to, this experience, because this is all we have right now. We have no idea what's around the corner. This is the experience where we are right now today. Can we say yes to this experience?
That's wonderful. And how do you tell, what's the gut feeling that you use, or intuition, what kind of wisdom to separate acceptance from the concept of giving up? Because for a lot of people, they say, well, I have to accept this, so I'm going to give up. So, and sometimes I say, well, how to know what to accept and to flow with life, and what to really say, I think that I can change this, or I think that I can make it. I think that I can do it.
Yeah, well, that's that's the $1 million question. Nobody can answer that but you. And I think that when I have a challenge that I'm wondering, do I keep fighting? Do I give up? Do I flow? I mean, sitting in silence and really, finding what are the messages that I'm getting. And I think that, we can often, we might be just given a different direction. Life will say, okay, well, there's the door's closed here, but just find a different way. Just, approach this from a different angle. I mean, I'm someone who's incredibly persistent, and I won't give up, and I'll keep going. But sometimes what's the choice? I think you have to ask, well, what's it going to cost me if I give up or if I keep fighting? And I think that's what wisdom is, trying to understand, what the internal messages are and why are you doing it? If you really ask the question, what's my why? And if that comes from a really authentic, altruistic place, I think that you're on the right path.
Well, let me tell you that some of us last year, we visited your beautiful country. Well, a continent.
Yeah.
We went to Sydney, and it was an amazing week. And we had so much fun, and we learned from Australians. I think it's a wonderful society. And if you have to describe your values as an Australian, what could be those values that you really cherish?
I think, we connectedness and togetherness. And I think that is really showing in the way that we have approached the pandemic right now. The numbers right now in Australia, I think in the whole country, maybe we've got 5 cases in the whole country. Wow. It's almost like, I've just returned. So I've been living in the US for 6 years and only just returned 4 weeks ago. So I had to quarantine, and everybody has been, incredible here. Everybody locks down, everybody's caring about each other. And, there's some people that, aren't so happy with it, but really we understand that we want to protect each other. And because of that, our numbers are incredibly low and life is pretty much back to normal. So I think that we really value that connectedness, that togetherness, the caring for others. And I think that sometimes it might seem at odds with, we're sort of pretty easygoing, or as my husband said, it's not bad for a bunch of convicts. So, I'm really proud of this country and the way we've handled the pandemic compared to, for example, America. So my husband is American, and, that's very much about, freedoms. And, nobody can make us wear a mask. Nobody can tell us to lock down. We're here. It's more about the greater good of all. And I think that that's a great quality. Wow. And that's the difference in results. It's amazing that you can compare both. And it's actually exactly the truth, what you're saying, because, some of us live in the US. I live in Miami. We are connecting from Miami to you in Australia. And why do you think, Janine, and I'm going to ask this question and then open for members of the circle to ask you some questions as well. Why do you think that for so many human beings, change is a difficult task to admit, to process, to achieve, and it's better to stay in the comfort zone? Yeah, we don't deal with uncertainty very well. We fear of losing the things that we think define who we are. And people ask me about that all the time, particularly from people who are athletes who say, I couldn't, if I couldn't run or if I couldn't play the sport that I enjoy, then I wouldn't want to live. But you never know. I mean, when it's in the letting go. I mean, I'm a great fan of Joseph Campbell, who says you've got to let go of the life you have to get the life that's waiting for you. And you'll know from my TED talk that I have chairs on the stage, and each of those chairs represents a stage in the hero's journey, which Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, wrote about. So I think that we're all on a hero's journey, and I think that we're all repeating patterns. And when we recognize that, it makes it easier to deal with the challenges that we're currently going through. But we don't like feeling uncomfortable. I think that's part of the human condition.
That's true. But 2020 will be a historical year for all of us because we have been forced to deal with uncertainty and to deal with no expectations and, and to flow and to be more open. And actually, I recognize the losses and the sadness and all the difficulties, but I think it's going to be one of the most amazing years in my personal growth because it has made me grow and confront the teachings and everything I learned. So, it's just to put in actions the words and the philosophy and to thrive in that. Well, I have to say, Janine, that, I thought of saying this to you, but I said, well, why not? Janine has a beautiful smile and she has a sense of humor after all what happened to her. But, I have to confess to you that when I read the book and I heard about your story, I had to stop using an expression. I don't know if somebody else uses that expression in the US or in Australia, but sometimes when I feel really, really overtired, that I'm exhausted, I have said, I feel like I've been hit by a truck.
I was hit by a truck.
And you were literally hit by a truck. And when I read that story and I said, oh my God, I will never say that because, Janine is lucky to be telling the story and to be inspiring other people. But for so many other ones, they were hit by a truck and they are dead. So, and I wanted to tell you this because, it came to my mind that sometimes we use words as an expression of something, but really nothing that I've been feeling, the exhaustion or the tiredness could compare with the real situation that you live because you were literally hit by an utility truck. So I wanted you.
I know, and it's true. And talking about humor, it's been a really important part of my life. Being able to laugh is, there's a great healing power in that. And I also want to say that, every single day of my life, living with disability and living with, so the people know I am walking, but I'm a paraplegic. And, just living with paraplegia and living with chronic pain every single day that I get out of bed with pain, I have to say, yes, okay, bring it on, life. I stepped up. And in that way, we've all said that. The fact that we're here and we're in our bodies right now means that we've all said yes to this experience. And so that's all life is asking from us, just to show up and embrace every experience of life.
Wow, what a powerful message and what a wonderful opportunity to talk to you. If somebody has the last question, because I don't want to take much time of Janine that has been very, very generous at these early hours in Australia to be with us. And of course, Janine, I read that also you had a sad divorce as part of your life story. So that could be in itself another battle, because a lot of women are part of the circle, and divorce sometimes, it's a change that brings a lot of grief and sadness in
I've been, lives. I think I've had every experience that's possible, but I had, 3 children, and then my husband at the time had a breakdown and he was diagnosed with a mental illness that made it impossible. I had to then, I went through a divorce and single parenting for 10 years, which was actually in many ways more challenging than my accident. So, I know what that's like. I know not everybody has been an elite athlete that's had an accident, but so many people have been through relationship pain and trauma and separation. And, you learn a lot about yourself through that experience too.
Well, thank you so much for inspiring us today in this part of the world. And I will catch up with your books because I have to read the other ones.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, so the latest book, Defiant, which you've read, we're now just, I'm speaking to some producers in Hollywood, and we're looking into making that into either a movie or a documentary. So stay tuned.
Thank you so much. We'll be
Thank you.
staying tuned to see Defiant on the screen. Thank you so much, Janine, for being with us.
Thank you.
¿Qué tal? Gracias por la sintonía. ¿Qué tal la conversación con esta increíble mujer? De verdad que es un desafío uno quejarse cuando tiene la posibilidad de escuchar a una persona tan inspiradora como Janine Shepherd y sobre todo esta obra, ¿verdad?, que ella ha escrito. Yo he conocido a muchas personas con discapacidades y todas me dicen lo mismo, que su capacidad especial o su discapacidad les hizo crecer como persona. Ella dice, Defiant. A broken body is not a broken person. Gracias, Janine, por estar con nosotros. Muchísimas gracias. Y gracias a ti por escucharme, por verme. Recuerda que si nos estás viendo en nuestro canal de YouTube, es importante que actives la campanita de notificaciones para que todas las semanas, casi todos los días, te enteres del nuevo contenido que hemos subido aquí a nuestro canal de YouTube. Si nos escuchas en audio, bueno, pues también suscríbete al podcast para que no nos escuches solamente cuando te acuerdes o por casualidad, sino por preferencia y por alertas, porque te llegarán nuestros recordatorios. Gracias, Dios es amor.